Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Alright, so the tech playtest is now out for Starfinder 2nd Edition, and in case you aren't caught up, no, Starfinder 2nd Edition isn't even out for Starfinder 2nd Edition yet. That is to say, the official core rulebook doesn't come out for Starfinder 2nd Edition until August of 2025, which hasn't happened yet as of the posting of this video. And for some reason, Paizo is already putting out the playtest for some new classes for a book that will come out down the line. No idea why Paizo is releasing a playtest for a game that's not fully out yet, but alright, let's do this. Let's review the playtest classes for the tech playtest as best we can. This playtest covers two new technology-based classes, the Mechanic and Technomancer, in Starfinder 2nd Edition. Now, these are very desired classes because the Technomancer and the Mechanic were part of the core classes in Starfinder 1st Edition, and so a lot of people were upset when it was announced that they wouldn't be in the Starfinder 2e core rulebook. Oh, before I get started, I have some exciting news. Me and a few other YouTubers will be actually playing a Starfinder Tech Playtest one-shot here on YouTube. I'll GM a one-shot I designed myself to test the two new classes magically, technologically, and combat-wise. Swing Ripper, Team Player Gaming, Wisdom Check, and Time to Dice will be playing the PCs as I test their skills and combat abilities. The game is scheduled to be out on May 10th, 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific Time, and will be held over on Swing Ripper's channel because he's the one with the most streaming experience. Check out their channels for more details, link in the descriptions below. Alright, so let's move on to the two new playtest classes. Now, as always, I won't be able to get into every little detail of these classes. If you want to try them out yourself, I'll put a link in the description below. I'll also talk about the basics of each class first and then give you my opinions of the class at the end of each section. Starting off with the Mechanic, the iconic Quig makes his return from being the iconic Mechanic from Starfinder 1e. He's a Ysoki or Ratfolk who was born on Akaton, that John Carter of Mars planet. He's a bounty hunter who uses a spy drone to help him catch his prey, and it's nice to see him returning in Starfinder 2e. The gist of the Mechanic is that they are a non-spellcasting class that are masters of technology, creating and modifying any technology they find on the fly. They also have put together a drone or some other piece of tech to aid them in battle. They are an intelligence-based 8 HP per level martial class. They start off as expert in fortitude and reflex saves as well as surprisingly perception. Actually, they get up to legendary in perception at level 17, which helps them spot and disarm traps and such, so it kind of makes sense. They are trained and get up to master in simple and martial weapons, light and medium armor, and class DCs. They also start off trained in computers, crafting, and 2 plus their intelligence modifier more skills. The Mechanic has 3 major abilities to talk about. The first and probably easiest is Custom Rig. They start off with 2 toolkits cobbled together to be a single toolkit for free, a repair toolkit and 1 toolkit from those listed on screen. There's a bit of wording question as to whether they can fit all 4 toolkits into one of their custom rigs, but that's not really a big deal. The second thing they can do is a bit different and pretty interesting. They can take a single action to modify an item that they have access to. This modification can do one of a few things shown on screen now. And they can also do some special extra modifications to their exocortex, which is their subclass, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, the mod is temporary. It only lasts until the start of their next turn, and if they mod something else, the previous mod falls off. However, there are class abilities and feats down the line that make some mods more long-lasting. So the Mechanic subclass is called the Exocortex, and the name is a bit misleading. Essentially, in lore, an exocortex is a brain implant that lets a mechanic control a device, either a drone, a mine layer, or a turret. This is your subclass, what kind of mechanical companion you have. It's just named after the neural link thing because, I guess, branding? Exocortex was the thing in Starfinder 1st Edition. The drone is essentially an animal companion, except, it's an AI drone instead of a living creature. Upside is that it's immune to a bunch of things like bleed damage. Downside is that basically you are the only one who can repair it, so your mystic can't heal it in mid-battle for you. Drones automatically start off with a melee attack, but you can give it a gun with a modification. And just like animal companions, there's a bunch of different forms for you to choose from. Also, kind of like in Inventor's Enhancements, your drone can have customizations which give it additional abilities like speech capabilities or manipulator arms. They start off with one enhancement, but with feats they can grab more. The Mine Exocortex is essentially a machine that you carry around that manufactures and lays mines. There are a maximum number of mines you can make, but your machine makes 2 mines every 10 minutes when you have fewer than your maximum. You can set a mine near you as an action, or for 2 actions you can huck one 30 feet away. Your mines only detonate if you take an action or a reaction. Also, it should go without saying that mines have no monetary value and fall apart after a day, which is about the most responsible mine laying you could possibly ask for. The turret is kind of like the drone, but it can't move. In return for you needing to haul it around, it automatically starts off with a ranged weapon and you can easily shift between damage types. It is also easier to repair if it is destroyed. And remember, all of these Exocortex devices have their own unique mods that you can do to them as one action. Now there is something I haven't mentioned yet about the mechanic. If all of this seems just kind of meh to you, then you need to understand that a lot of the power of the mechanic comes from their feats. There are a lot of feats, and a lot of them do some pretty powerful stuff. In other words, a lot of the mechanic's power budget is going to come from its cool feats, like providing drones with additional modifications, allowing you to make healing mines, or giving your turret additional damage options. Now onto my opinions of the class. First of all, I think it works fairly well. The ability to mod weapons and armor is nice, especially since you can change up what mod you have on the fly. The base chassis of the class is a bit weaker than normal. They don't become legendary in any class DCs, weapons, armor, or saves, only perception. However, they make up for that with some very strong feats. I'm not quite sure if the math of the Exocortex companion works out correctly. I've never been a big companion guy, so I don't know that part of the system too well, but I assume it can be fine-tuned to work. Something I kind of dislike is that the mechanic is tied to their Exocortex creation. You see, in Starfinder 1st Edition, the mechanic could either have a kind of drone creation, or they could have an implanted targeting computer in their brain that kind of made them a super soldier, and I would have liked to see that as an option. There will be the inevitable comparisons between this class and the Inventor. However, there are a few key differences. The Inventor's Overdrive gives them bonus damage to all of their strikes, whereas a mechanic's ability to mod an item has more options, but it only works on one object at a time. Also, you need to do mods every round, whereas an Inventor's Overdrive works for a minute. Then again, the mechanic's mods just work, whereas the Inventor needs to roll. It's kind of 50-50. Moving on, we have the Technomancer, and also returning as the iconic from Starfinder 1st Edition is Raya. She's a Lashunta, a mildly telepathic species from Castrovel, which is a jungle planet. Fun story about Raya, she's basically got no tragedy. Yeah, both her parents are alive, she didn't have a hard life as a kid, nothing. She just kinda went to college for her magical arts degree and then decided to go explore the universe. That's kind of rare for a background for an RPG character, I feel. The basics of the Technomancer is that they are a spellcasting class that effectively hacks magic to get more power out of arcane spellcasting than like a wizard might. There's a lot of really interesting descriptions here talking about how their magic works, which is really just fun. They are an intelligence-based 6 HP per level arcane prepared spellcaster. This is a change from Starfinder 1st Edition, which didn't have any prepared spellcasters. They start off being expert in will saves and are trained in all other saves, simple weapons, spellcasting, and light armor. They are also trained in the skills Computers, Arcana, and one more plus any more for high intelligence. And like most spellcasters, they eventually get up to legendary spellcasting at level 19. Now, unlike some other Starfinder spellcasters, they only have 3 spells per spell rank. Anyone who is familiar with a wizard will immediately find the Technomancer familiar. They have a spellbook, or more accurately a spell database. They have something akin to a wizard school. A lot of this is familiar, but there are some twists, so let's get into it. Technomancers largely have a whopping 5 class features that you will want to keep track of. They also have a few other class features like that spell database / thumb drive that I talked about, but these are the major ones. The first one is also their subclass called a programming language. This is kind of like a wizard's spell school. It gives them extra spells they automatically know as they level up, and gives them special bonuses when using other class abilities. We'll talk more about programming languages later. Side note, all the programming languages are puns based on real-world programming languages or things that are programming language adjacent. DPS++ instead of C++, Fort Run instead of Fort Ran, that sort of thing. Secondly, they get a series of focus spells called spell hacks, and which ones they get and can get depend on their programming language, which remember is their subclass. An interesting thing about magic hacks is that they are all spell shapes, I think. That may run a little askew of the rules, but it is clear what they are supposed to do. Anyway, don't sleep on magic hacks, some of them are really good. One of them lets you use a spell gem, basically a spell scroll, twice. There's also something called jailbreaking that we'll talk about later that makes magic hacks even better. Spell cache is a relatively simple ability. Once every 10 minutes they can, as a free action, replace one of their prepared spells for any of the free spells granted to them by their programming language, so long as the spell ranks work out. That's a great way to add some versatility to their kit. Now we get to overclock gear, which is kind of their bread and butter ability. After a Technomancer casts any non-cantrip spell, they can take a single action to siphon off some of that residual magical energy into an item that they are carrying or wearing. This is called overclocking, and the item they overclock is determined by their subclass. While an item is overclocked, it gives out a bonus, again dependent on subclass. Overclocking lasts a minute. Their last ability they don't get until level 3 and is called Jailbreak Spell. Jailbreaking is a free action, and they can only do it if their gear is overclocked, and then when they do it, their gear stops being overclocked. What jailbreaking does is let you apply a spell shape as a free action instead of a regular action. And many Technomancer-specific spell shapes, including magic hacks, give you an extra bonus if you jailbreak them. If that sounds confusing, let me lay it out. A typical combat might involve a Technomancer casting a spell, and then after that using an action to overclock their gear. They get a bonus while their gear is overclocked based on their subclass. Then, on a later turn, they can use that energy to use a spell shape and jailbreak it. This lets them spell shape as a free action, and makes the spell shape more powerful, but they lose their overclock status in the exchange. So, back to programming languages. Here is what each programming language gets you. Spell cache are those free spells that you learn automatically, and remember you can substitute prepared spells for these spells. Magic hacks are those cool spell shapes I talked about. You get the first one for free and the others you can pick up with feats. You also get a second non-focus spell shape. Now, any Technomancer can pick up these with a feat, but each programming language gets you a specific one for free. Then there is the boost that happens when your gear is overclocked, and then the jailbreak spell shape. This is an extra bonus when doing a specific jailbreak. So when Fort Run, for example, jailbreak spell shape's Denial of Safety, it gives you this bonus, in addition to the normal bonus for jailbreaking Denial of Safety that any Technomancer would get. The programming languages are DPS++, which overclocks weapons and makes you better at shooting guns. They are kind of the single-target damage-dealing subclass. Fort Run is more about defense and has a lot of energy-resistant abilities. They overclock their armor and it hurts enemies that hit you with a melee attack. Servo Shell is about summoning robot companions, and their overclock ability actually applies to their summoned creatures. Now, several people have pointed out that this subclass basically doesn't work right now because of how action economy works, but I'm sure that'll get fixed. Lastly, you have Viper, a play on the Python programming language. It's kind of a utility subclass. Their big thing is making consumables like spell gems, which remember are spell scrolls, last more than once or have some secondary benefit like turning them into grenades. Now again, like the mechanic, while the base chassis of Technomancer may seem weak, the bulk of the power comes from feats. There are just a ton of super powerful feats that mostly involve them just ignoring the rules of their own class because basically they're hacking magic. Backup spell lets you recover spell slots once an hour, though there are some restrictions. Soft reboot lets you keep your gear in overclock mode after jailbreaking it once an hour. Lots of powerful options here. Now onto my opinions of the class. First off, I love the flavor and the theming of the class. It's really fun. Also, I don't think we've seen a class get this into spell shapes before, so it's cool to see this design space explored. However, I feel the class is going to be action-starved. Think about it. To overclock, which you'll probably want to do as soon as a fight starts, you need to cast a spell, then overclock, which is basically all three of your actions. This leaves no room for moving around or taking cover with your weak 6 HP frame. Also, some of the programming languages could use some tweaking. DPS++ wants you to attack with a weapon which you won't be great at as a spellcaster. Viper requires you to have spell gems to use it, which you won't have with a new character and is kind of reliant on GMs giving you spell gems as loot. So if a GM doesn't do that, it can really strip the subclass of its power. And then there's the problem with servo shell that we talked about earlier. I like what the subclasses are trying to do, don't get me wrong, but I think they all need a little bit of tweaking. On the other hand, like the mechanic, I love the idea of a weaker class chassis but a stronger set of feats. This can lead to a lot of very interesting Technomancer builds with strong feat options, and it could make for a real choice if you should spend your class feats or go for an archetype or not. A lot of times I hear complaints about Pathfinder classes having no good feats at certain levels, but not so with these classes. All in all, I like the playtest. There are some bumps and minor hiccups here and there. I like that the Pathfinder Starfinder engine is putting more power into feats than into base class chassis, and that the feats are good enough to compete with each other, and so that there's not one obvious best option. Also, these feats do well, but don't completely outstrip existing Pathfinder classes, which was a problem I had with the Starfinder Player Core playtest. Anyway, that's all I had to say about the playtest. If you enjoyed my content, please leave a like and comment below. That lets me, as well as YouTube, know that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!